Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Stop Telling and Start Listening. I'm David Cook, your host. I'm excited because this is one of the early broadcasts episodes as I switched over to a new platform. And I'm so excited to have a unique and interesting guest today. Normally, we take topics of people, I would call them more social, political related. This is social related, but it's a little bit of a pivot. We are going to talk a little bit today about the world of dating, but not necessarily the world about dating in the sense that I really want to understand dating, but I have as a guest a matchmaker, somebody who specializes in putting people together. And being married for 43 years, going on 44, I have no clue what the dating world is like. However, everybody tells me it's hard. We're busy. We don't, that people don't know how to meet people, where to meet people. There is still a lot of strange, crazy people out there. And so it's always really nice to know that we have somebody who maybe can help us navigate that. And I'm interested in process stories and whys. So let's welcome Andrea LaRosa to the show. Andrea, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me today. I'm excited to have this conversation.
I know I'm so curious. It's just like, I have to confess to my audience is that I really love the natural wing it kind of approach to things. But when I went on your website today, I started scrolling through and reading and reading and reading. And it's really very interesting. I mean, you call yourself, a matchmaker. You had another one that I can't remember. I was going to highlight it and I didn't, but you have some cute little names that you call yourself. And
Dating and
um,
relationship expert.
no, it was something like dating godmother or something like that. I don't know.
Oh, yes, yes.
I thought, all right, cool. So, my first question really is, okay, why? What made you decide that you wanted to be a matchmaker guru like you are?
That is an excellent question. And I love this question because I actually started my business as a coach. I got into life coaching and realized I wanted to specialize in relationships and then got certified for relationship coaching and then realized like I was hosting local speed dating events and people needed so much help to meet other people and it just kind of spiraled. But the matchmaking happened because particularly women were sharing stories with me about how they would go on a first date and they wouldn't feel safe. And the guy always wanted to meet at some obscure bar at like 7 o'clock at night in an area they didn't know. And then they were nervous about walking to their car. And there were just all of these weird stories, nothing super extreme, but just made me realize that matchmaking will allow me to help people feel very safe and comfortable in their dating experiences. We do background checks. So men don't feel like they're getting into a date with a crazy girl. And I've heard horror stories from men, especially here, about going on a first date and the woman showing up drunk already or
Mm,
being very aggressive with him. So both parties need to feel very comfortable on that first date, or they can't relax into it and they can't be themselves. And what's the point of it then? Dating should be fun. And I want to create an environment so that people can have an enjoyable first date. It should be exciting. It should
hmm.
not feel like a job.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's like, so what you're really doing is you are helping people much like a recruiter would in a business. This is what I'm looking for. And you kind of go through the process of finding somebody that kind of fits that profile, but at the same time, they know that it's somebody that to the best of your ability, they can feel safe and just engage in the connection, the meetup.
Yeah. Yeah. I do all the heavy lifting for them. So they don't have to worry about swiping. They don't have to worry about being catfished or kittenfished or there's no worry about any of that. I've done all of that for them. I've met their date. I know that they're compatible. I've checked all their deal breakers. Now they get to just go and have a good time.
That's pretty cool. That's really interesting. How long have you been doing this?
Going on 7 years now.
Oh my gosh, you're a pro now. So how did you navigate COVID?
COVID was surprisingly my busiest season because they wanted to make sure that their date was vaccinated, and they wanted to know if their date would wear a mask, and I could set up dates out in the park for them, walking dates on the beach because I'm in California. So it's really easy to just send them to the beach and they can have their space, and social distancing really wasn't an issue for dating during COVID. It's surprising, but it was kind of the opposite of what most people were experiencing.
So these were people who just didn't want to be cooped up. So
Right.
I got to socialize. I still want to keep actively finding somebody to hang out with.
It was lonely. It was a very lonely time for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, especially I guess if you're single, it would be extremely lonely. I mean, I had a a house full of people. It was kind of like
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to be lonely.
Right. If you lived alone and you were single, that it was rough. It was a really hard time.
Yeah. Interesting. So as you were going through this whole process, I mean, walk me through how obviously you had coaching, you had training and, relationship development, stuff like that. But, as you first started this out, what were some of the things that you stumbled over, things that you learned, did better, said, I got to do this differently or better. What were some of the things that just showed up as like, oops, I gotta think this through, or I gotta be better organized on this.
Oh, I had a lot of oops. I mean, I think any business owner would tell you that they've had a lot of oops moments of like realizations, can't do it this way, got to do it that way. A lot of it is just the the back end of the business. A lot of it is the realizing that you really want to help someone. Matchmaking is a very elite service. It's time consuming, it's expensive. I've learned the hard way to background check people before they're allowed to pay for services. So that was an oops. Um, I've realized that, setting people on dates without knowing where they are, or, having to learn how to properly vet someone, the questions that you have to ask. I need to understand body language at a much higher degree than a client would ever understand, because I need to be able to look at the person and determine whether or not I think they're legitimately looking for relationships. I've had to learn um, to research people in social media and
Mhm.
researching them. We do official background checks. My assistant will run an actual federal background check on someone. We pay for them. But just researching them on social media is a really important step as well, because man, that will tell you a lot about someone's personality. They may never have broken the law, they may not have a criminal background, but they could be an absolute horrid person. And you can see that in their social media sometimes. So I've learned a lot of lessons.
Kind of reminds me of that question in the movie Stripes. Have you ever been convicted? Convicted? No.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's interesting. I had a friend here in Arizona when I first moved here in Arizona, gosh, 16, 17 years ago. And she was a dating coach. And she would actually go on dates with her clients. And, it was mainly guys, but she would sit, 10, 15, 20 feet away from them and just kind of observe the dynamics and help her client, be more successful in their dating arrangements. Is that something you do, or is that just,
Mhm.
do you
So
really?
we do two different things. It depends on where they're coming in, but we can either send them on a mock date where it's someone that I've hired to go on a date and kind of take note of issues that come up. So we send them on a mock date, or I send them on a date if I'm noticing that they're really struggling. Nowadays, it's really easy to just to make a phone call on your phone, put your phone down on the table upside down and leave it there during the date. And then I'll sit at the bar and I'll look for body language and I'll listen in a little bit. And then usually, I might send a quick text that says, like, go to the bathroom, because everyone has Apple watches nowadays, or smart watches. So
Hmm.
it's so easy to set something like that up and to really help coach someone through the process on the date. Had I done this maybe back in like the 90s? No, we didn't have any of this cool technology. We didn't have smartphones. We didn't have a way to we didn't have smartwatches. So there was
Mhm.
no way to like really set this up stealthy
Yeah.
like I can now.
Yeah. I know. And you saw say, sit in on a date. I'm thinking like, how do I sign up for that job? I want to be on that.
It's so fun. It is so fun to watch someone because, from a distance, I don't even need to hear them really. I just need to see the body language. And a lot of times, and I'm not trying to pinpoint men in particular, but just as an example, they misread when a woman plays with her hair.
Mm,
They see it as, oh, she's flirting. Her head is tipped. She's playing with her hair. No, she's self-soothing, dude.
hmm
She's not flirting with you. So whether she's excited or uncomfortable, nervous, lean out a little bit, give her some
hmm
space. And so
hmm
then they'll go back and they'll give her some space and then she'll start to lean in and he'll realize, oh, okay, I see what I need to be looking for. So it's not uncommon for people to misread body language on a first date.
hmm Well, that makes sense. I would see that too, because when you said that, I have heard that is that when a woman starts playing with her hair, it's not flirting. She's trying to get comfortable,
Yeah.
whatever it's going on. You call it self-soothing. I like that even better. But so, we're gonna talk a lot about listening and body language and stuff like that, but I still kind of want to get into the whys and wherefores here. This is
Absolutely.
this is so interesting. Uh, I guess this is not. You said it's you don't want to sound like you're picking on guys, but at the same time, being a guy and recognizing that and I'm a boomer, so I was raised in a different environment and different styles and stuff like that. Speak the truth. How difficult are we?
You guys aren't difficult. You're actually really easy. It's just, I feel that men struggle, especially today, with understanding their place. Guys will come to me and say, I want a strong, independent woman. Well, that's great. You want her to be independent, financially independent. You want her to have a good career. You want her to be going somewhere. But then you have to understand what comes with that, what expectations will come with that strong, independent woman.
Hmm.
And so I just think men have a challenging time right now to figure out how to navigate through the Me Too movement, what they're allowed to say and do on dates, how to ask for consent, how to still be sexy. One of the biggest challenges I hear is that it's all about consent right now. If you're on a first date, don't just assume you can kiss her. You need to have that consent. But on the flip side, I am also hearing from women, I just want him to be the take charge kind of guy, but he's got to ask for consent.
hmm
That's very confusing to men.
hmm
So, in their defense, men are so confused. They don't know what to do. They don't know if they should be asking for consent or if they should be a take charge and just go in. They don't know how to read body language now. They're not experts in it. You shouldn't have to be an expert in body language to go on a first date.
hmm
That seems very unfair, but you kind of do,
Right.
especially nowadays.
Yeah. And if, and I guess again, I kind of relate it to me is I feel really naturally comfortable with people. So for me, I feel really comfortable navigating. People always tell me that, that it's that I'm easy to trust. They get comfortable with me quickly, but that's me. But there's a lot of people I'm not that are not outgoing and been doing relationship development stuff forever. So, not to use a stereotype, but at the same time, I am, if you're an engineer or a CPA or something like that, your people skills are different than mine. I mean, do you see
Absolutely.
that? Yeah. So it is a kind of a what we do and also personality styles that play into that, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Somebody who has a background in sales, you are trained to understand body language on a very different level. You are trained to listen very differently on a date because of your career choice has kind of assisted in that. Which is why I think some men who do have sales backgrounds will be labeled as a player. He's not a player. He's just incorporating his work ethic into his
Hmm
dating. That's all.
Yeah. I'm just being who
Doesn't
I
make him a
am.
player.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's funny that you say that because that's usually what happens is, people say they trust me and stuff like that at the same time. Oh, you're such a sales guy. And I'm thinking, gosh, I feel like that's insulting, but at the same time, it's like there is a compliment in that, hey, you're really comfortable with me. I got to decide how comfortable I am with you, how much of this is sincere or how much of it is the sales schmarmy stuff, you
Right.
know. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, so equal time. So tell me a little bit about the challenges of coaching and helping out the women that you're working with. What's their struggle?
You know, I hear a lot of women, and it depends on where they're coming in from. Most of my clients are California based, but I do have clients outside of California because I work with so many other matchmakers. It's easy enough to match them. But from a lot of women, I hear they want. Have you ever seen that show Yellowstone?
No, sorry.
Okay. So there's a character on it. His name is Rip. He is your stereotypical cowboy.
That's the
He's
guy with the dark hat and the dark
yeah,
beard. Okay,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
husband or something like that.
Yeah, see, so you know it sort
Oh, I watch
of.
enough stupid commercials.
Women will come in and that is what they want. They want that type of male, that very alpha male, but they want him to be emotionally intelligent.
Uh,
So what they're asking for maybe exists in 1% of humans. And he's taken also, right? That man is taken by a level 10 woman
yeah.
because he's a unicorn. It's unrealistic. So women will come in with expectations and all of these boxes that have to get checked. They're just so unrealistic. They don't exist and they're not open to, dating someone who's a little bit more on their level.
Hmm.
Or an alpha female who is a high powered woman wants another alpha male, and she's not open to a man who's okay with being a traditional beta, somebody who is still, maybe he's an architect and he does well for himself, but he's not that take charge because it's like two magnets, negative
Hmm.
and negative don't work. You have to flip it.
Hmm.
So this is where opposites attract.
Right. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I had a life coach a long time ago was talking to me, she was like assessing my personality. And she says, Dave, you have to be right. You have to be in control. You have to be good and you have to win. And I said, and that when you're in that environment, the world is perfect for you. And I said, yeah, I guess more or less, be honest. She says, well, that means that the person you're interfacing with has to be willing to lose, cede control, allow themselves possibly to be wrong, et cetera. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm creating an environment where I'm repelling the people that I actually want to attract.
Right. Right.
And I thought that was a really heads up because then it made me think about where how to dial down some of those characteristics. Do I want to always be in control? No. But then you have to recognize that ceding control then is something that you need to be willing to do in order for it to work. But if I have to be in control, then I'm going to be around somebody who is willing to not be in control, ceding control.
Exactly. Exactly. There's a lot of women out there right now who are CEOs, presidents of their organization, directors, high powered jobs. So that means when they're working, they're in their masculine energy. They're a little bit more alpha.
Mm-hmm.
If you want an alpha male, girl, you have to get into your feminine energy
Mm-hmm.
because if he wants another alpha to alpha, that it doesn't work in a relationship. You're going to butt heads all the time and you're going to come across as controlling. So it's understanding that work you and relationship you then have to be two different people.
Mm-hmm. Which is hard.
Yeah,
So
very
do
hard.
do people when you provide that enlightenment and stuff like that, how do people respond to that kind of coaching, or do they just kind of go, but that's who I am and it is what it is? I mean, what's the dynamic there?
So yes, a lot of women will come in with this like, I am an alpha female, I want an alpha male. And if they're not open, so I coach them first before I match them because I can't match you if you're not going to be successful. And so I just have to be really aware of the approach, from one alpha female to the next. This is what you're looking at. This is your
Mhm.
situation. So, if you want to keep dating other alpha males, this is what you're going to get. And then I give them examples of what he could be like. And that's when that realization kicks in and they go, okay, all right, I'm open. Let's try this, which is why I do blind dates. So then that way it's not no, 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 no to anyone who doesn't look like Rip from Yellowstone.
So that is the ideal candidate right now. Rip. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, the last few women have all said the same thing. I want a Rip who's emotionally intelligent. Honey, he doesn't exist.
What is it?
He's a fictional character.
Well, but doesn't he come across? There's, well, I haven't watched the show. This is really funny. We're going to diverge for a second, but isn't he like married to Beth? Beth is a piece of work.
She is a hot mess.
So then,
Hot
but
mess.
there's a coolness to him in his interface with her.
Yes.
So doesn't he have some emotional intelligence, or is it just that he just tunes it out and
He does, but I don't also think that Rip is a good example of a traditional alpha male.
ooh,
Her father in the show is a traditional alpha male, but Rip actually isn't.
okay, all right. Her
So
father.
there's that misconception of what an alpha and a beta male really look like. But yeah.
Well, no, we'll keep going. I'm listening.
a, for years we've looked at alpha men as douchebag, the game player, the guy who just um is the pickup artist. But that's not really what that word means. An alpha male is just a man who really takes control over his life, who has direction, who strives for more. He's the man who wants to be the CEO. He's the man who wants to he wants to level up always, right? He wants to be a leader in his field. That's the alpha male. A beta male doesn't mean that he's quiet and wimpy. It just means that he doesn't need to always level up. He doesn't need to be the leader. He doesn't need to be the one who's always taking charge. But it doesn't mean he's weak by any means. And it doesn't mean that he can't support. He can't step up and be the leader of the relationship. It just means that maybe he doesn't want to be CEO and he's okay with the direction he's taken. It means that he's probably going to be the 9 to 5 guy. And, he's okay with supporting his partner and taking care of the kids sometimes. It's these misconceptions we have of what we think an alpha male is and what a beta male is.
That's interesting. As you were talking about that, I had a client conversation. They were working on trying to redo their roles and responsibilities in the organization, and the way they were. And this one architectural firm that I interfaced with to get some coaching was doing this without titles. And so they were like, and it was like this thing that says, some people want to be more in a leadership role. And it was like an architectural firm. So some people want to be more in a leadership role or in sales and relationship development. Other people want to just be on the technical side. And in the middle, there are people who want more responsibility on the technical side. And so what you were doing was, when you're doing career development, trying to figure out where they see themselves, where they want to be, and where they want to be, as opposed to saying everybody has to be a leader that looks like this. No, you can be a leader on the technical side without ever managing people. You just take on serious projects at a high level, but you're not responsible necessarily for a team other than the team on the project. And I thought that was really interesting. But that's what you're talking about, is that everybody said we have to have alpha males. Well, that concept isn't necessarily true. You're saying alpha male but you're not really defining an alpha male. You're just using that as an easy label, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really cool. Interesting. So alpha male is in high demand, huh?
Well, yeah, they are, especially for high-powered women, just because of that misconception. But it's, like you said, it's not that much different than an office. You have to have the leaders and you have to have those who are really good at following your worker bees, in other words.
Yeah.
And we've misinterpreted what the worker bee their value.
Yeah.
We really need to look at that and say, like, no, the worker bees are important too, that the betas in an office space or even in a relationship, you need to have them. They are vital to the growth of your organization. It is vital in order to grow in a relationship to have that balance.
Yeah. So when you were talking to people, do you have people who really don't know what they want? They just know that what they're doing
Oh,
isn't
yeah.
working. So
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, how do you,
uh,
so it just starts with talking with them, the typical conversation.
yeah. So I coach them through, I get a lot of males in their 20s where their parents have reached out to me, or an aunt or uncle has reached out to me and said, like, hey, I have my son who, you know, great career, went to college, did all the things, owns a house now, but forgot about dating and doesn't have a clue what to do and doesn't even know what his type is. So we sit down and we coach, and he goes through my online course, and the online course is designed for clarity. So they go through a lot of different practices to figure out, like, what is it that I'm looking for? And then we send them out on a ton of dates. So then that way we can see what the patterns are in their dating. I noticed that you're always going after brunettes, so that we're seeing what your type is, or, you like the women who, I don't know, work in certain industries. That's a certain personality type. If you're always going after somebody who is an architect or an engineer, those are a type A personality, and you like that type and it's working well with them, then that tells me a lot about who you are. So
Mm-hmm.
we really dive into, like, what their type is. Who are they really looking for? Who's a good partner?
Mm-hmm. So it's a process, right?
It's, yeah.
This is pretty cool. I'm fascinated. But okay, so back to, because this show is all about listening and learning and stuff like that, and I'm hearing this, that's what you're basically doing, is you're finding ways to connect with people, hear what they have to say, listen, but it goes beyond just the conversation. You're going through a series of processes of learning and discovery. You're observing, you're listening, you're paying attention. You're also giving them cues to pay attention as well. Is that pretty much like the science of this bad boy?
Yeah. So I think the number one thing, if you ask people in general, what is the number one thing you want out of this relationship? Not the relationship with me, the one that they're looking for. I want a good communicator. Men and women equally all say, I want someone who can communicate. I'm tired of dating people who don't know how to communicate. But the problem with that is that everyone thinks they're a good communicator. Nobody sits back and says, yeah, I really suck at communicating.
That's true.
And,
They think
and
they
the real
understand
is,
what it looks like it.
yeah. And the realization that communication isn't talking. That's a small portion of it. Communication is body language. Communication is how you listen. Are you an active listener, or are you just waiting for your turn?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of different pieces to it.
Do you coach people into that too as well?
100%. Every single person that comes in, whether they think they need it or not, we coach through all of the levels of communication and boundaries, because if you think you're good at it, you're probably not.
You use one of my favorite word, boundaries. Let's talk about boundaries for a minute. How do you help people quantify or understand their boundaries and other people's boundaries?
So first things first is to understand that boundaries are not walls. I think a lot of people misinterpret boundaries as walls. I explain it to my clients as, think of it as if you're standing on the beach and you draw a line in the sand. You can cross that line, but it's up to you to communicate that that person has stepped over the line and what that line means and what is it to you. So first and foremost, we sit down and we go through boundaries of respect, for example. What does respect mean to you? Because what respect means to you does not mean the same to the next person. And is it fair to get mad at someone for crossing a boundary that they never knew was there?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to explain to them that you have this boundary, what it means to you, and what it looks like to them to not cross it.
Mhm. Or what happens when they do cross it.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So, because I'm like, and you use the terminology boundaries a little differently than I would, but that we're gonna wade into this because it's possible for us to, for me to, this is my theory. It's possible for me to recognize that there are some boundaries that are deal breakers that have to absolutely positively be respected. There are other boundaries that need to be understood, and we navigate the tension of how they can maybe not necessarily be moved like hard moved, but have some flexibility to it. Is I
Yes.
okay? You all right with that?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's very similar as the fact that, my little line in the sand analogy of you can step over it.
But when
Absolutely.
but when you're there, you need to recognize that we're in a place of tension or conflict.
Right. But what's going to happen when you step over that? Are you
Yeah.
towing the line or are you like really just launching yourself over it like it doesn't exist?
Yeah, well, that's disrespectful.
Right.
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 Right. So when somebody talks about a boundary, it's like, okay, I'll help me. So the expectation is that you need to be able to articulate why this is important to you, but at the same time, that person who understands that's a boundary needs to be curious as to why it exists and how do I navigate it.
I think there's a big misunderstanding too that, we talk about boundaries and I hear people talk about boundaries and it's always this expectation of the other person needing to understand them, but the responsibility is yours to communicate them. And I
Mhm.
think that's a big disconnect that we have because everyone's boundaries are different. Everyone defines them differently. Everyone, has different levels of how important is this boundary? Is it a deal breaker or is it like it's annoying, but I can deal with it kind of boundary? It's your responsibility to be communicating what your boundaries are,
Mhm. Mhm.
not the
With
other person's responsibility to know what they are.
without criticism though, right?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the in that getting to know you space. I'm not telling you you're wrong. And I'm not shaming you for being there, but I'm informing you and educating you that we're in a spot that is uncomfortable for me.
Exactly.
Okay.
100%.
And that I'd like and when I expressed it that way, it's like you said, it's me sharing with you what's going on, not me finding out like surprise, say, dang, you just stepped on one of my boundaries. Well,
Right, and that's the other communication element to it is what style are you communicating these boundaries in? Are you being aggressive about it? Nobody wants to hear that. That's that you. You stepped
yeah,
over my boundary. How dare you? Like, I didn't know it existed. So sorry.
yeah.
It's being an effective communicator, just being assertive about it to say, like, I feel this way. This is my boundary. I just want to let you know. It's it's taking on the responsibility instead of pushing it on to someone else and saying, well, you did this or you did that. It's the number one way to make a relationship end is to blame and criticize.
Mhm. Yep. Shame, make the other person wrong. Yeah, that's going to be a
Yeah.
non-starter pretty fast. In this day and age, you talked about the Me Too movement, but in this day and age where everybody's part of the reason we're doing this, having this podcast in the first place, is about listening and learning and developing relationship. In this day and age where the level of tolerance for conflict seems to be extremely low, and the impatience or the cancel culture, whatever words you want to use, is extremely high. I mean, how do you how do you get through that? I think you told it a little bit more, but do you see that a little bit? Where
I see it a lot.
people have a much shorter rope right now than they used to give people.
The generations matter when it
Mm,
comes to that. The baby boomers versus the Gen Xers, millennials, Gen Z. There's a huge difference between each generation. So for me as a professional, I have to know the generation that I'm dealing with because if I'm going to talk to someone about first date practices, for example, and they're an older Gen Xer, which means they're probably in their 50s, they're going to have a very different view on that than if I was setting up somebody who's a Gen Z,
mm,
who's in their 20s. So coaching these two people is going to look very different.
Yeah.
You know,
What's the difference?
sending someone on a date for even a baby boomer, right? I get men and women in their late 60s, 70s who are going out on dates. That couple still wants old traditional dating practices. He picks her up, he opens the door for her. The chivalry.
Mhm.
That's really important to them. Somebody who's in their 20s, they don't even know what the word means anymore.
Mhm.
This is not important to them. They don't care that you open the door for them. They don't care that you even pick up the tab if you're going out for a meal. But what they do care is how you speak about genders. What they do care is they're listening for, do you have the same understanding, and do you have a political awareness that I can relate to?
Mm.
So what they're looking for is very different from what a baby boomer or a Gen Xer might be looking for. And their tolerance, and I'm not trying to bash on the younger generation here, but their tolerance is a lot lower.
Yeah. A
They
lot
just
lower.
a lot lower. They just don't have a tolerance to understand that different generations have different experiences. We were raised during a time period where men flirting in the workplace was acceptable.
Mhm.
That is how you met, actually. Most relationships happened that way. Look at Bill Gates. He would have never met his wife had he not been extremely insistent with a woman who worked for him.
Mhm.
And they are happily married. But if you gave that scenario to, a younger person in their 20s, they would be appalled. They would be
Mhm.
disgusted by that behavior. So it's just very different now.
Yeah. Interesting. So, lower tolerance. I know you're not bashing them, but that's really is very. Was that just because, like I'm trying to understand why is that a byproduct of the lack of socialization? Because I feel like, the one of the challenges, the age of technology, tremendous gift, not going to criticize it. And I love the energy and the passion that the younger generation has about their life, because I feel like they strive for a little bit more balanced, reasonable life. And if it doesn't exist in the workplace, I'm out. I'm going to find it somewhere else. So they're probably doing the same thing in their relationship. If this doesn't work for, I'm out. And
Right.
there's not a lot of time for things because they're pretty passionate that it just has to happen.
Mm-hmm. Instant gratification.
Yeah.
They are the generation of instant gratification. We didn't have that growing up.
Mm.
If we needed to find out some type of information, we couldn't just pull out our phone and look it up. We had to go to a library and use a card catalog. And yes, if you have younger listeners, they're probably going, "A what?"
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
it's
remember.
paper, folks.
I remember going through, get the microfiche out and then get the periodical out and then have to type my papers on a typewriter. So I mean, I'm definitely I'm way back.
Wow.
White out when I make a mistake. Yeah. So if I'm using things that terms that nobody even understands, but yeah, you're right. It's at our fingertips. And so that's the same expectation. It's going to just happen because,
Mhm.
yeah. So back to the communication challenge. Is the communication challenge then, in the younger they get, the more you have to focus on the emotional intelligence side of things, communicating, paying attention.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's teaching them how to listen, because
Mm.
listening is a struggle for dating, because for one, you go on a date and you're nervous and you don't want that awkward silence to happen, but it's learning how to embrace the awkward silence and understanding that it's not about the questions you need to ask them. It's just about leaning into the experience and the process and just listening. It's so important for people to understand. I think the younger generation has a lot of energy and they're fired up about a lot of things socially, politically. They're just really fired up. And I think it's great. And I think it's the energy that we need to push forward to have good change happen. But on the flip side of that means that they have to learn to slow down sometimes and listen and know that you can't just wait for your turn to talk and you can't have an agenda. Relationships don't work that way. So while you gave that great example of how they go into the workplace and they're like, this doesn't work for me. So instead of sticking through this and being miserable, which is what my parents' generation did, because that's just what you did, they leave and they create the environment that they want. That's why we have so many entrepreneurs now. And there's so many coaches in different areas because everyone's creating the career that they want to have. And it's fabulous. But if you want to create the relationship that you want, you have to look at it as, if I'm creating my own business, that takes a lot of effort. So does a relationship. You have to listen to what your client wants if you're going to have your own business, or your customer. Same thing with the relationship. You need to listen to what your partner wants. And you have to give more than you take from it. And if both partners can understand that they both have to give more than they take, now we have a solid foundation.
Well, I'm thinking about this for a second, though. How do you know that, back to the impatience, right? Or the low level of tolerance. How do you know, or how do you assess, I guess the thing back to you, not necessarily the individual, your client, but how do you encourage them to stay with it? Or how do you know it's time to get out? I mean, because in a workplace, it's pretty easy to say this sucks, I'm out. And because, but I don't know, you're talking about, yes, you have that thought, but maybe you need to think about it, investing just a little bit more time, a little bit more effort, a little bit more. How do you know how do you sell that? How do you encourage that? Or how do you agree, yeah, this isn't going to work? I mean,
3-date rule.
Oh,
We have a 3-date rule. If there's no deal breakers happening, if there's no deal breakers on the table, you have a 3-date rule. You have to go on 3 dates with that person, and then you get to determine whether or not it's a good fit or not. But you have to give them a chance.
Wow, 3 dates.
3 dates.
Unless, well, you said, unless there's
there's deal breakers,
they're clear deal breakers, like,
Mhm.
okay, they're, one of your, whatever rules you have.
Yeah. Boundary issues or, whatever it is. If there are deal breakers then obviously no. But if you're coming back to me, if a client comes back to me and says, I don't know, I just wasn't feeling it, there was no romantic chemistry on a first date.
Yeah.
Okay, you're going on a second date. That's not a
Really?
good enough reason. You're going on a second date. And a lot of times, by the time that they get to the 3rd date, they come back and say, you know what? I wouldn't have given this person a chance if I was doing this on my own, but I'm glad I did because we actually have a lot in common.
Oh, that's
And I want to
brilliant.
see where this can go. You have to give it a chance. You have to remember that there are 2 people involved. They just want that instant gratification. They want that instant chemistry.
Right. They wanted it to be easy. And it isn't.
Yeah.
It isn't easy. That's probably why they need you in the first place, because they found out that it isn't easy.
Well, dating apps have done that. They've given this false idea that we can have instant chemistry. And really, if you ask people who have been married for 10, 20, 30 years how they met, a lot of times it was, I really had to pursue her.
Yeah. Not me.
I don't know what your story is. I don't know what your story is, but for a lot of them
I have an entirely different story. I was lucky. Well, I'll just tell you my story really quick. I'm just trying to keep track of time because I lost track of it. But I was entering my junior year in college, and I had a really, really, really good friend. In fact, we were so close as friends, people thought we were dating, but we were just buds. And I said to her, I'm ready to settle down. I need to get serious about, dating somebody, because, I was just like dating, college is fun, right? You meet a lot of
right.
people and different dynamics and stuff. And I said, she did what you would do. Okay, so give me a little sense of what you're looking for. And, as I explained, somebody, athletic and, fun and, not too crazy, in fact, I need somebody who's a little bit, more settled down because I'm too wild and blah, blah, blah. And she actually mentioned somebody's name. And I saw, oh, no, I don't know her and stuff like that. And then about 2 months later, one of my best friends, one of her best friends' roommates went to Spain for the second semester. And this woman who is now my wife, who is also the woman my friend mentioned in her name, was moving into their apartment. And I met her, and I was actually participating in this going away party. And I showed up obnoxiously drunk and boisterously loud and all sorts of other stuff. And I went to a really straight, very straight laced college. And so most of the time when I showed up like that, all the women in the dorms would just like shake their heads. So there's Dave Cook being Dave Cook again. I could not rattle this woman's cage. And I'm thinking like, gosh.
Wow.
So then like the next day I bumped into her in the library and she said, how was your night? When you left? And I said, I had fun. She said, yeah, it looked like you were having fun. But there was just like, all of a sudden I think, oh, this woman is not judging me. And so then, I hung around with a little while. I kept stopping at the apartment all the time to see my friend, but I was really checking out this woman who ended up becoming my wife. And that's how it happened. But,
So you pursued her.
I did pursue her. Yep. Yeah.
And it took time.
It did take a little bit of time. In fact, I think it took me a couple of weeks before I actually asked her out. In fact, when I asked her out, I said, oh, and another thing. And she sat down like, yes. I don't have a very good memory, but I do remember that. But anyway, yeah.
Aww.
So, but it is those, like you said, it started very much like what you're just talking about. I knew what I was looking for to a certain extent. And I had somebody who kind of like right away it clicked and so, okay, here's some things. But then from there, yeah, you're right. There was a series of events. It took a little bit of time.
It took you guys getting to know each other.
Yep. And actually, I guess when I think about it, I met her in the middle of January for the first time, and we didn't go out until the middle of February. So it was about a month.
Yeah. Which
and
makes sense.
And I was usually the kind of guy that would ask people out all the time, so there was, I was obviously intrigued. I didn't want to ask her out and have it be a disaster because she had my attention. So I wasn't moving very quickly. I was moving intentionally, but I wasn't moving fast.
See,
interesting.
That's what we're missing is that intentionality with dating, of understanding that it takes time to get to know someone.
Mm-hmm.
They can't just check boxes. You have to really get to know them. And dating when you're older is different than dating when you're in college, because when you're in college, you're young and you're building a life together. People who are trying to date, if they're in their 40s and 50s, they have built their life already. They are set in their ways, and it's more challenging to now try and pursue someone because you're not building a life together anymore. You're not dating for that same purpose. Now you are dating to intertwine your lives together and to see if that can work. It's different way to date.
It is. That's a whole nother, it brings up a whole nother part of the conversation is, so people have to recognize that there's going to be some change. They have to create space for the change, the adjustment, and if they actually are serious about having a relationship.
Yes. Yeah. If they're older and they're, and I say older because I mean, honestly, it's really over the age of 35. I start to see that people
35.
have careers 35 and up, because at that point you're pretty set in your ways. You've probably already established your career. You've, gone to college, you've moved up the ladder. When you do that with your partner and you have that support together, you learn how to navigate it as a team. But when you do it solo and then you have to bring another person into the mix, you have to remember that you're not just bringing them into your life, you are being brought into their life. And now you have to figure out how to make that work. What is the give and the take in this? It's a lot more than building it together.
It's like, how do we do us? How do we do our collective independent lives?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty hard. All right. So to those people in my audience who are dying to know, how do we get a hold of you if we wanted to venture down this great road of being coached by you to find our alpha male of dreams, the unicorn in our lives?
Find your unicorn. I have
Yeah.
your unicorn for you in my database. Just
Yeah.
kidding. My website is probably the best way to do it. It's datesmartermatchmaking.com.
DateSmarterMatchmaking.com.
Because I want
Okay.
people to date smarter.
Don't we all, right? We want to
Yeah.
do a lot of things smarter. I know I just love this conversation because I'm thinking of, I don't think people struggle when I'm coaching businesses, business leaders or their teams, the worker bees, if you will. And I tell them, you guys realize that you're in relationship here. And they
Hmm.
look at me like I'm talking from a different language. I said, no, no, no. You guys spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Well, not as much anymore, obviously, but you still spend time interacting, collaborating, communicating, fighting, arguing, disappointing. But you guys are in a relationship.
Yeah.
And you got to recognize that in order to be in a relationship was one of the big things that you emphasize more than anything else is that you have to know how to communicate. And communicate is more than just how we talk to each other. It's how we engage each other in every single facet of our of that dynamic.
Mhm.
Are we listening? Are we paying attention? Are we encouraging? Are we supporting? Are we loving? Are we being inspiring? Are we being responsible? Are we being respectful? You know, all those things to me are all still fall into that thing. Can I trust Dave with who I am in this workforce? Can I trust Dave with the work that I have here? Can I trust Dave to be the kind of coach, mentor, advisor, teammate that I need him to be? You know, that's work. And then we talk about, the dynamic of dating. Well, it's what's different. Nothing. There's nothing really different.
Just different level of intimacy. That's
That's it.
all.
That's right.
But that's the only difference. Because like you said, you still have to listen, you still have to communicate, you still have to be respectful. And there's a reason why people joke about, oh, my work wife or my work husband. Well, that's because you spend so much time together. It's 5 days a week, like you said, 8 hours a day. That's a lot of time to be with someone. That's probably more time per day that you spend with your coworkers than you do with your actual spouse.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can attest to that. That's true. you
Yeah.
know and I was thinking because I was working with some stuff working on teaching. Actually, I'm teaching a class with my clients right now on boundaries, and one of the things that I was focusing on is cycling. And used to do a lot of ride and cycling groups, and when you're doing things in cycling groups, you have 20 or 30 people on a bike ride together, and we're wheel to
Wow.
wheel, we're side to side. We have to be able to trust the person that we're riding with. And communication is important. So think commands like, bike or car up means a car is coming, or car back means the car is behind us, right
Oh,
turn, left turn, slowing, stopping. And we have to make sure that, if we see like a rock in the road or a piece of dirt in the road, you have to point it out so people see it, because the people at the back don't know what's going on as opposed to people in the front. So communication is extremely important. But a big component of that communication is that we have to trust the people that we're with. Because if you have one Yahoo who doesn't participate in that, he's putting I said he, sorry, that individual is putting everybody at risk.
right.
And then we don't want to be around that person because we can't trust them.
I always wonder when I see them out on the street and I see like a collaboration of like 20 bikers, and I'm just like, how do you do this? How do you not like bump into each other? Like, I see the safety purpose, but like, I don't. So that's
Yeah, well,
good communication.
you said you went to school at Arizona State. I remember you telling me that. So, like,
Yeah.
a big part of our bike ride, because I live in the northeast part of Phoenix and Scottsdale. So we go up north and then we come downhill to the bike shop. So the bike ride home is basically 10, 15 miles of straight downhill. We all snug up next to each other and go 35, 40 miles an hour on the bike. Okay. And when you're going that fast, falling is serious. You go to the hospital if you crash.
Right.
So you need to be in that. So how do we do it? We talk a lot, and so like, somebody passes you, you have to yell out clear so they can move over. You just don't jump in a lane. You have to mark the person says clear so you can come in. There's a lot of communication. But, again, that's the example. But the point is there's a lot of communication. Communication is essential. Respecting
Yeah.
boundaries, respecting the rules, respecting expectations. But in order to know that, like what you said, is I have to be able to communicate with you what I expect, what I'm looking for, what I desire, what I seek. And that's the other
Yeah.
thing that you're emphasizing. It's not just communication, it's this interplay communication.
Your bike, this is a great example though of giving more than you take, because you are shouting out things. I don't bike, so I don't know what the actual language is, but you're, for example, shouting out that there's a rock in the road so that the guys behind you can see and avoid it. So you're
Mm-hmm.
looking out for the guy behind you
Mm-hmm.
and you're thinking about the person next to you. So actually, this is a perfect example because you are actually giving more than you're taking.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to be
Yeah.
because I'm responsible for the person's behind me safety. Imagine if I go zing around a rock and the person behind me crashes into it and goes down and takes 8 people with them. Technically, that's on me. I mean, we're not going to say, Dave, you should have counted it out. Nobody's going to yell and scream at me. But deep down inside, it's like, shit, yeah, I should have said something. I'm going to feel guilty.
Right.
So I have a responsibility in this relationship with my fellow cyclists to make sure that we're all safe.
So what I hear you saying is that, ladies, you should go for a man who's a cyclist because he's going to give more than he takes.
Not necessarily, because some cyclists like to ride alone. The reason they like to ride because they want to deal with that bullshit.
Oh, okay. So you need a guy who's into the group. I don't know what you call it. So I apologize if
We'll
my,
call it the Peloton for the sake of argument, but yes.
yeah.
But but that's part of it. It's kind of like, and that's the reason I was using this analogy. It's kind of like, kind of funny, but I've been out of the corporate world as an employee, if you will, for 20 something years. The reason is because I didn't, at the point in time, I didn't want to deal with that crap.
Mm-hmm.
And I look back on my career, if I knew how to effectively communicate, if I knew how to, we'll put in quotes, play the game, if I knew how to at the level that I know now, I could have had a different career. But
Mm.
back then I just said, I don't want to deal with this crap. I don't want to deal with people's bullshit. I don't want to deal with, the politics. I don't want to deal with, so I went alpha. I went alpha male, said, I'm doing my own
Mm-hmm.
thing. Screw you guys. Right. And so when you ask me, that's why I kind of like the cyclist. It's like, that's what you're looking for is somebody who likes to be in community. If you want somebody who's social, how do you identify somebody that's in community as opposed to somebody who just loves being on their own?
Right.
So back to what you were saying, words they use, their lifestyle, the things that show up in social media. There's so many things that you presented in this conversation. It's like, I got it.
I
You
know there's
know,
so many little nuances, but yeah,
Yeah, but
I love it.
but I love that because how many like I was thinking of the conversations I have with my clients. I talk to them. I remember one of my clients saying to me a long time ago, Dave, we have neither the experience, the confidence, or the language to do the things that you do. To me, it's
Yeah.
obvious. To me, it's easy. And to you, because of who you are and where you are and the things that you've done, in some respects, it's obvious. It's easy. You have
Right.
the experience. So you're bringing somebody in and go, really? I have to think about this? Well, if you want to be in relationship,
Yeah.
that works. That fills your life with the void that you believe or the thing that you would like to add to your life. Yeah. You got to discover what that looks like.
Absolutely. Takes effort.
Does, yeah, and
Takes
time.
work.
Yeah, that's a nasty. People don't like that when you tell them that.
I know. I don't use the word work anymore. I just stick with effort.
I like that one. I might borrow that because I've said that to people, and usually they don't bring me back when I tell them it takes work. They don't, because the last thing they want to do is pick up another 4-letter word.
There's something about that word work that's just very triggering for a lot of people. They
Yeah,
hear it and they cringe and they stop listening.
yeah. I'm busy
It's
enough. I don't need more work.
mm-hmm,
Yeah,
right. So
but you've told them they have to invest.
you
They
have
have
to
to.
invest. It's an investment of time and energy, and you have to put in the effort.
Yeah, cool.
Soon effort will be the same, but for now.
This was really good. I appreciate the other thing that jumped out at me is the was the 3-date rule. I love that. What you're doing is you're being respectful to the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And if I show up on a date and I decide that the date didn't go well, screw you, I'm done. and minus the flags. I understand the flags, but it's like
Right.
back to the respect component of the relationship. I'm going to respect this person's desire to get to know me just like I've decided I wanted to get to know them. So I have to put in the effort and I have to be respectful about it.
Yes.
I love it.
Mutual respect. You need to have that in
Yeah.
work, in relationships, even with strangers.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? This was a great conversation. I just really appreciate you taking the time. It was fun. It certainly is a different world than anything I've operated in. And I loved you educating me and my audience on what you do and how you do it and what makes it work.
Absolutely. It's so much fun. I love these conversations. I could probably go on for hours.
Well, maybe next time. Uh, all right. Well, this is David Cook signing off from Stop Telling and Start Listening. And remember, open your heart, open your ears, open your mind, open your eyes, because once you start listening, everything changes. Have a great week.